But really, Superman is very notoriously hard to write for. He's a living icon of the kind of person we should all strive to be. And most of his best stories more focus on the world around him and the people around him rather than him. So, what could be done that hadn't already been done with him? Well, originally they were going to have a year-long story arc leading up to the marriage of Lois and Clark. Unfortunately, at the time, there was a TV show also called Lois and Clark: The Adventures of Superman, because what's brevity? Where they were building to the exact same thing, the marriage of Lois and Clark. So the TV producers then went to the comic writers and said, no, you can't do that, we're doing that. So at pretty much the 0 hour, the creative team had to scrap everything that they had planned for a full year-long story arc. So what do they do to make up for that? They kill him. They killed Superman, arguably the most recognizable intellectual property on the planet. Just killed him in a knockdown, drag-out, bloody battle for the fate of the whole planet. That was actually the easy part. What do you do next? He's already dead. Superman, at the time, had 4 monthly titles. So that's 4 titles where their main character was dead. Instead of just chugging along, DC just stopped publishing them. For 3 months, DC stopped publishing 4 books. And in the interim, most of the other DC books, they were showing what happens to a world without Superman. But then we saw what the team was planning on doing with each of these titles as they created new characters for all of them.
Sorry, my computer's so slow.
It's fine. So first we have the last son of Krypton, because they had to give all the characters Superman-based nicknames instead of just calling them all Superman. A grim, violent man who would often kill or maim his criminals, cold and distant, so sort of like Superman without a soul. And next we have the new Superboy, a clone of Superman created as a book geared towards teenagers. He's young, brash, and impulsive, a Superman lacking the moral backbone instilled by loving parents. He also gets to struggle with his identity and place in the world, something all of us who were once teenagers can, identify with. And there's the Man of Tomorrow, or Cyborg Superman, possibly the most unwieldy name in comic book history. His genetic parts matching Superman, his robotics parts made from Kryptonian technology, and he has fragments of Superman's memories, and despite not being able to remember who he was, he's doing everything he can to fight for truth, justice, and the American way. And last but not least, we have the Man of Steel. Oh, sorry, no. There we go. John Henry Irons, a former government weapons designer in hiding. And with the death of Superman, he saw a world that needed reminding of what Superman stood for. Of note, he was the only one of them to never claim he was Superman, but was the one who was most like him. And as a 39-year-old straight white male, I can't really speak to how cool it is to have a black man representing Superman, but he is a great character. So all the pieces were in place, and all the characters began having their individual journeys of heroics and personal discovery, each trying to fill the role of Superman, and in their own way, resulting in lots of interesting and conflicting ideologies. In addition, we get to further see how the world deals with having new supermen. Former allies, former friends, especially Lois, are all reacting to this sudden return of Superman and trying to figure out which one's the real one. Cults are even starting to rise up to fight over which one's real, because Kal-El is no stranger to religious iconography. Month after month, we were treated to these fun stories, heavy stories, heartfelt stories, as the 4 Supermen learned more and more about the shoes they were trying to fill, why compassion is so important, loyalty, respect, forgiveness, why the world loved and needed Superman. Or were they? While 3 of these books were giving us glimpses into each of these Superman's personal lives, one title was focused more on Lois Lane and her struggles with the loss. We did not even see what was coming. Mongol, an alien megalomaniac once thwarted by Superman, suddenly comes to Earth, and wasting no time, he destroys Coast City. Home of Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern, more than 7 million people wiped out in a second. Just before the bombs went off, we learned that the cyborg Superman was actually leading the whole thing as he tries to kill the last son of Krypton. As these events unfold, a depowered Superman returns from the dead inside the Fortress of Solitude, excuse me, with a sweet mullet. At this point, we learned that the last son of Krypton was actually an ancient Kryptonian weapon called the Eradicator, charged with protecting all things Krypton. When Superman died, his programming kicked in, and he went to go recover the body to return it to an energy matrix in hopes of reviving Superman. The contact resulted in him absorbing some of Superman's memories, which is why he didn't know who he was. He thought he was Superman. Meanwhile, we learned more and more about this cyborg Superman. He was actually a man named Hank Henshaw who, through a space travel trip gone wrong a la Fantastic Four, had been changed into a creature of pure energy, able to interact with machines, and had gone insane. Years ago, he had left Earth in a spaceship he had created after bonding with the birthing matrix that originally brought Superman to Earth. Now completely unhinged from the reality of what actually happened, he blamed Superman for all of his pain, wanting nothing more than to destroy Superman's legacy throughout the entire universe. But even depowered, Superman is going to Superman. He, Superboy, Steel, and secretly Supergirl lead an assault on the new Engine City created over the ashes of Coast City, where they're eventually joined by the returning Hal Jordan. Everyone's pushed to their limits, fighting, almost dying, trying to sacrifice themselves for the sake of the planet, everyone being a hero. The Eradicator even sacrifices himself to save Superman, repowering him in the process and giving Kal-El the strength he needs to finish the job. And the day is saved. Superman's back. Superboy realizes he has a lot to learn. Steel showed the world what it means to really be inspired by Superman. Mongol's defeated, and the Eradicator and Cyborg appear to be dead. Superman is even filmed rescuing Clark Kent, actually a shape-shifting Supergirl, from an underground bunker where he'd been trapped since the Doomsday attack, allowing Superman to resume both parts of his former life. Now, all of this started with the Death of Superman arc at the end of 1992 and culminated with the completion of the reign of Superman at the end of 1993. Superman was dead for less than a year of published stories. So as cynical as that may seem in regards to the futility of death in comics, they did a lot in that time. 4 new characters, each with their own compelling story arcs about what it means to be Superman, all of which carried on well after he returned. Superman himself had to cope with the fact that he was dead. I mean, he was actually dead. It's stated multiple times that if any factors around his death had been even slightly different, it might not have even been possible. But he had now had to, deal with coming back and what happened to a world without Superman. But that's not all. Meanwhile, over in Green Lantern, Hal Jordan just lost his home city. Millions of people gone in a flash because, as he saw it, he wasn't there to protect them. While I understand people having a problem with this ended up causing Hal Jordan to go mad and become one of the biggest villains of the DC universe, which was both compelling and heartbreaking. I mean, we could all understand and sympathize with it. This is, of course, ignoring the retcon those years later that completely absolved Hal Jordan of all wrongdoings, in a way robbing him of humanity, but that's a different conversation. So, like a lot of crossovers on the surface, it seemed like a ploy just to increase sales, but when you look at what the creative teams were doing with that ploy, they really made the most of it. A really, really fun story that has questions of identity, idolization, right, wrong, loss, and all because the world lost one man. And that's what any good writer should do in the face of mandatory storytelling. Try to make us care anyways. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. And I also really like this. I apologize for nothing.